how did the development look like because of the language? Like you were both developing the language and the game at the same time. So like, did you
Yeah,
stop the game to change the language, or like did you need to
not
update?
not really. I mean, here's the thing. The so that first uh demo of the programming language I gave was in late 2014, I think. And at that time, it was a full programming language that you could use. Like obvious, like I demoed a little video game in it, right? Um, but there was some stuff that was kind of hacked together and not really good. Like at that time, okay, so interestingly, when I gave that original talk, I knew that it was going to be manual memory management. I think I was pretty clear about that in the talk. It wasn't going to be garbage collected, but I wasn't sure about other things. Like I wasn't sure that it was going to be a systems programming language um, that would let you fully access operating system APIs, or whether it was going to try to be high level in some way. And so that initial demo that I showed, when it opens a window and stuff, um, it was actually calling into a C library that I had pre-written that did all the Windows API stuff. And I was like, maybe that's going to be how it is. And you just interface with these higher level things, or maybe it's just literally a low level programming language. And we made it eventually a low level programming language. But so some of that happened in 2015, right after this demo and all that. But I was still working on the witness, right, until literally January of, well, really March of 2016, because you always have to do support when a game comes out and fix things and whatever. So, um, but at that time, so I started this game around the middle of 2016, which was a really long time ago now. But part of the reason for that is I've been doing this plus the programming language plus the Braid Anniversary Edition, all three of those things. And plus running the company, like, making business deals and figuring out who to hire and all these things, right? So that all takes time. So, but at that time, in the middle of 2016, the programming language was already in an early version of its modern form. It just, I would say, it was not as industrial strength as it is now, right? It didn't have all the features that it has now, for sure, but also some of the features, they had little bugs or little things that I knew they wouldn't handle. But because I was the only person writing code in this language, it didn't matter. I knew and if I had a problem, either I would just work around it really quickly or I would just skip it or whatever. But then also I did spend a lot of my time from 2016 to 2020 working on the compiler, but also a lot setting up the game. So, we did a whole new game engine from scratch. We ported over some of the Witness engine, but a lot of it was new, really more than a lot more. I didn't want to do a real engine going into this project, and we did a real engine for some reason. And
But
so,
when you ported, you needed to switch it from C++ to Jai, right? For the witness part.
yeah, and we didn't do that with very much code.
Okay.
Um, but like a lot of the editor we ported over, like the gameplay is nothing alike, right, between the games. But a lot of the editor, and then we wrote a new renderer for a more modern API because the Witness was targeting like a DirectX 10 or 11 class API, which is still in this older style where it's more of an abstraction barrier. And then a more modern API like DirectX 12 or Vulkan, um, you do a lot of things. You're like allocating buffers on the GPU manually. And that's a big difference, right? It lets you do a lot more things, but it's a big difference. So we essentially did that from scratch, and all this stuff. Like I ported over my animation system that I had written for the Witness, like for character and object animations, but I made it better and I added a thing. So in the Witness, you couldn't really like we only had one character and it was your shadow. So like we didn't work very hard on animation blending or having a lot of different animations for a character. And then there was machines where we would sort of, if you take an elevator up and then you reverse it, that's actually all playing animations because you have little wheels in the elevator and stuff.
Yeah.
And we would just like seek through and find the right time to reverse it and all that. But it becomes different when you have a game that's character focused and it's like, oh, is he running and idle and whatever? And you want to blend through all these things. And so I made a little data-driven declaration language for an animator to use to control what happens and all that stuff, right? So there was a lot to do. But yeah, like the programming language was already far enough along that it was mostly fine, but I also kept upgrading it over that time. And then I think our first beta was in the beginning of 2020. Is that right? It was, let me go to our changelog. Yeah. So I believe it was like January 1st, 2020 was the very early beta. And that was just, 15 people or something. The beta was very small, and then we just have been gradually growing it.
How, when did other people join you on the Sokoban game?
From the beginning, because we already had a company from shipping the witness, and it was like, I don't remember how many full-time versus part-time we had, but it was about 12 people or 14 people. And we had an office in San Francisco and we were just doing our things.
Okay. So what about the release? When will it come out?
We have not announced anything yet. However, I would say I want it to be not a lot more than a year from now, which sounds like maybe a long time if you're like waiting for a new game to play, but that's very quick compared to how long development has been. Now, if we do that, it'll still mean it was almost 10 years from the time the project was started, which is just incredibly long, and we can't do that anymore because I will be dead. So, but now that we've got a new engine and a new programming language and all this stuff, most of that doesn't need to change for future games, right? And so we can just build on this foundation that we've got to do new stuff after. And so the game 3, which you've seen mentioned, the idea behind this game, by the way, this huge 500-hour game, it was supposed to originally just be a small game that we did really fast. And then we would go on, it would be to prep the engine so we could use the engine for game 3. But then the engine got a lot bigger and the game got a lot bigger, and it's just always harder to do things than you thought that it was going to be. That's the reality of game development. And so all those things conspired to mean that it's not done yet. But man, this game is really something. It's really big. And then hopefully when we release the engine, people will really appreciate it too. Like, we're not going to release it in a product kind of way. So it's not going to be like a competitor to Godot or something, because it's oriented in a different way. So like Godot is trying to be like Unity, right? Where you can make a game through the UI and you don't really necessarily have to know how to program. Maybe you write a little bit of the scripting language or something, right? This engine is not like that at all. It's a very programmer-centric engine, which is good if you're a programmer who wants to be in control of how things work, because you don't have this big legacy of stuff that is hard to modify. But it also means that it's just, you don't build a game in quite the same way. So it's got an editor in the game. Like, you run the game and you have an editor that lets you edit entity fields and all that, but it's inside the game. It's not outside the game like it is in Unity and Godot, right? And but what that means is you're in control of it and you can do whatever you want with it. And we'll see how that's received at the time. So actually, if you're going to count all the things that I've been doing, right, it's really like at least 4 things, because it's the engine, the game, the Braid Anniversary other game, and the programming language. And then, I mean, if you really want to get picky, probably the programming language and then the user space libraries that are in the modules folder are probably kind of 2 things, sort of. So I don't know. I don't know how many things that is. I'm just trying to feel good about it taking 10 years.
How much does it take to compile? How much time take to compile now from scratch? The
The
game.
game,
Yeah.
it's longer than I would like. It's about 1.7 seconds on my laptop if we're building using our own backend. If we use LLVM in a non-optimized build, right, just a debug build, it probably takes another 2 seconds or 3 seconds more than that. My goal for the final compiler speed is that we want to be able to do 1 million lines per second on a desktop machine, and